Episode 164 Above Ground Podcast, Damage Plan with the Venerable Robina Courtin.
Disclaimer. The hosts of this podcast, Timothy Patrick and Will Foley, are by no means medical professionals. However, having lived experience with mental illness themselves, they have gained useful perspectives on common mental health issues that some of us struggle to overcome on a daily basis. By sharing their stories, they hope to create connection. By creating connection, they hope to help you find your purpose. And through purpose, we can all begin to build the foundation for positive mental health. This is Above Ground Podcast.
Coming at you live with real conversations about mental health from the peer perspective, it's time for Above Ground Podcast. Now your hosts, TPP and Will Foley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to episode 164 of Above Ground Podcast with the Venerable Robina Courtin. An amazing conversation with an amazing woman. She is a Buddhist nun from Nova Scotia. We have that coming up for you momentarily. But Above Ground Podcast is on the move again. This is the summer of getting out there back into community and handing out resources and having conversations. We just came off of Nipperfest, and now we are heading into the Summer on Central WAMC concert series, which is going on at the Linda on Central Ave in Albany, New York. 339 Central Ave to be exact. And WAMC and Nippertown and the city of Albany are teaming up to do Summer on Central concert series on Saturdays throughout August. Every Saturday in August. And Saturday, August 6th, we will be there. We will be there with a table for your resources, and so will Kyla Silk, the Rock Voices Choir, and Super 400. That's right, Super 400. Kyla Silk and Rock Voices Choir will be at the Summer on Central concert series with WAMC in Nippertown on August 6th, and Above Ground Podcast will be there also. And we will also be there for the last of the Summer on Central concert series, which is the Nippertown March Music Madness Final Four, and that is Saturday, August 27th with Shortwave Radio Band, Pony and the Pancake Girl Blue, and Side B. So an amazing concert series coming up that is being produced by WAMC, which is our local NPR station here in the 518. And WAMC is something that I personally listen to on quite length during the day on my travels and journeys throughout the Capital District and beyond. And again, we can't thank you so much for coming up and talking to us at Nippertown, at Nipperfest 2022, and looking forward to celebrating the rest of the summer and fall with you as Above Ground Podcast will be out there handing out resources and having real conversations. All right, and now, without further ado, it's time for the Venerable Robina Courtin. It's time to have your damage plan. Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome to Above Ground Podcast. Above Ground Podcast.
Because you can't serve below.
Oh, TPP. Wow. There you go, buddy. It's Sunday. It's Sunday evening. It's Sunday evening, man. And I'm very, very stoked for this one. We have an amazing guest with us this evening. Timmy, you want to expand on it?
I mean, I don't even know if I can do it justice, but what happened, I'll just give you a quick little brief. What happened was somebody sent me a video, and it was this woman talking about the one quote that really stuck with me. She said, "Anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants." And I was just like, I wrote it down. I set it next to my bed. I was like, it was just blew me away. So I watched a few of her videos, and I reached out, and surprisingly she responded. So we are blessed and welcoming Venerable Robina. Is it Courtin?
Yes, Robina Courtin. That's exactly right.
Courtin. Robina
Yes.
Courtin.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I thought what you're doing is amazing, and I'm so happy to be here. So happy to have these talks. Unbelievably necessary and important.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy night to join us. I think we jump right in because I think that's the best way to do it. How can Buddhism help us navigate the world today
Exactly.
from
Perfect. Yeah. So perfect question. Well, Will, I think in our modern culture, I'd say West, but it includes not just Western people, but modern culture, which of course is the philosophical materialist view of the world, and that's great. There's a lot of I think a lot of misconceptions, maybe a lot of misconceptions about this ancient Indian way of seeing the world. I mean, I think first of all, I remember the Dalai Lama saying recently it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago, and this is well before the Buddha. These genius beings who had come up with extraordinary kind of views of the universe, who developed these amazing skillful techniques called the world knows vaguely as mindfulness, which come from this extraordinary technique, this psychological skill these genius Indians invented 3,000 years ago. And as His Holiness said, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who began the investigation into the nature of self. So my sense is, we modern people probably thought it was Mr. Freud 100 years ago. So I think now we're really discovering the incredible wisdom, and I don't mean that in a mystical way, genuine wisdom about the way the mind works coming from India. I mean, what do we maybe track ourselves back to the Greeks, European style, but there's extraordinary. So more and more these days, there's knowledge about this, but I still think there's a lot of cliched ideas, So if you really strip it down, which is very much what I like to do, it's so important. If something's valid, it's got to be kind of valid in our culture, in our way of speaking, in our turns of phrases. So basically Buddha's an expert on the mind. That's his expertise. And that means the inner workings of the subjective workings of this inner process of thoughts and feelings and emotions. And I don't mean the brain. Buddha doesn't mind about the brain. He's talking about the actual cognitive process itself. So the key skill in Buddhism is that we can learn to become super familiar in a really clear, precise way with all the thoughts and feelings and emotions, which initially seem like chaos to us. And the real tragedy is we often don't notice what we're thinking and feeling until it vomits out the mouth, or until you're inert in bed one day and you don't know what's going on. We wait till the body feels it. So the real skill that we can get from Buddhism is the ability to, and it takes time, to start to listen to all these cognitive stories that inform the emotions before they get to the level of emotion. And then we realize we can start to really work with what goes on in the mind, because it's the changing of our mind and the cognitive stories that's the key to success. And that's the thing that Buddhism absolutely says every one of us can do, I mean, one of my teachers says we can mold our minds into any shape we like. So that's the fundamental starting point. We can learn to become familiar with what goes on in here, and then we can learn to reconfigure what goes on in here, because what goes on in here is surprisingly to us, is the main source of whether we're completely crazy or completely sane, that we can learn to navigate and change our thoughts and feelings and emotions. That's the essence of it.
I guess the beginning, the start, the foundation would be mindfulness and watching our thoughts.
Well, that's interesting. It is in general, but what's fascinating, and this is often not how we talk in our culture, Tim, we can see we've got body, we have speech, and we have mind, but we tend to sort of think where there's one big lump of me kind of plodding through life. The Buddhist approach to practice is very interesting. They would say the essence of it, yes, is to do exactly that. But first, we need to harness the crazy energy of our body and speech, which means discipline, which means learning to discipline as as the servants of our mind, which is the body and speech. So what happens is, I mean, like in my life, anger is like my middle name. Since a little girl, my mother did not have to teach me. The millisecond my attachment didn't get what it wanted, it exploded out of my mouth. My body expressed it. And let's look at the world. We can see that's what does the damage. That's what does the harm. We know in our relationships, just you blurt out even one word. Once it's out, you can't take it back. So it sounds boring, but it's a profound practice. We have to first learn to get some discipline over our body and speech and be skillful in what we say and do. And then we have the luxury to go to the real level of practice. And as one of my teachers says, learn to be your own therapist. So yeah, but that sounds boring in our culture. I'll control my body and speech. What does that mean? Because we go, I'm allowed to say what I like. We don't think it matters, but we can see even just speech, it hugely matters, So yes, absolutely what you're saying, but first get some, and that demands some kind of self-awareness, doesn't it? We don't have much self-awareness. We're usually just kind of have no feeling of who I am, and we just plod around life responding mindlessly to circumstances. So we've got to sort of step back from it and know that we can learn to be in charge first of the servants of your mind, then the mind itself. Absolutely.
So self-awareness is the first major key to figuring out how to operate in life, right?
It really is. No, it really is. And having the view that I can do something about it. Whereas I think in our culture, we tragically don't develop skills like that. The idea more and more these days, there are marvelous therapies around, there are marvelous people helping people become more conscious, but that takes time. If we can see the usual way we are, if we're not aware, this is what victim means. We're just completely mindless. We just think someone else plonked me on this planet. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why things happen. Happiness and suffering seem to be all just good luck and bad luck, and we have no way of interpreting it all, just except responding. So to begin to get some awareness and to some confidence that I'm in charge of me. I can be in charge of me. That's absolutely right. And that's already powerful. I think it's sort of interesting. It's not, even the way we tend to feel, we can see the words with the way we feel. I didn't ask to get born, did I? Already there's a feeling of victim in that either a creator, I'm not being rude here, plonked me on this planet, or mummy and daddy plonked me on this planet. Just interestingly, out of interest, the Buddhist view is we come into this world programmed with our own stuff. As we know, Buddhism talks about past lives and future lives. It's all in the literature. We don't need to talk about it. But the idea is that what is inside us is ours, and we need to learn to become familiar with it so we can change it. And that's already an amazing starting point.
How can Buddhism help us with our mental health?
Yeah, so it's so interesting, when we think of Buddhism, I think in the world, we put it in the spiritual category. And I think because we're so hard edge in the West, we would never equate that with so-called psychology. But if you analyze it, psychology is a Greek word for dealing with your mind. And it's not a joke to say that actually Buddha's expertise is the human mind. That's a bit of a surprise to us. But it's the Dalai Lama these days who's been having all these amazing conversations with neuroscientists and thinkers. It's now becoming well known in the West, in the modern world, that these genius Indians have existed even before the Buddha. As the Dalai Lama said, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And it's only really now becoming known, they're these extraordinary, sophisticated yogis and scholars and thinkers. And we kind of imagine, we're so arrogant, we probably thought it was Mr. Freud 100 years ago. But really, we're very rude, The interesting thing is that, the Buddha's, the Buddhist approach is actually the mind. So it's like, and it's almost deceptively simple kind of model of the mind, because it's in many ways, it's so radically different from how we deal with things, our mental health in the West, I would say that. And I could just briefly start some points if you'd like, but so I can now go there, okay.
Absolutely, please.
The crucial difference in the Buddhist model of the mind is I think we are brilliant at neuroscience, aren't we? Very brilliant, skillful, wise. This little bit does this, little bit does that. And it's very precise and detailed. Well, that level of precision and analysis is exactly the Buddhist approach, but it's not dealing with anything physical. It's dealing with the internal, subjective, cognitive process itself. Because the Buddhist view actually says the mind is not the brain. I'm not trying to be controversial here, but the real point is it's this incredible internal way our conceptual stories work. Forget the brain, but the Buddhist approach is that we can learn to become super familiar with the workings of our own thoughts and feelings and emotions. It takes time, and there are many obstacles preventing us from doing it, and we can go through those, but that's the skill we need to learn. And fundamentally, the Buddhist view is, as one of my teachers says, we can mold our mind into any shape we like,
Absolutely.
So if you think about it, the way we tend to be, and no one has to teach us this, we're very all convinced, I think, that the main thing that turns us into the person we become is the outside world. Mummy, daddy, the genes, the brains, the DNA, the naughty Catholic Church who taught us when we were children, the mean boyfriend, always the external world. The first instinct is to point to the external, not just for, oh, wow, you're mean boyfriend, you cause me suffering, but, you're a kind boyfriend and you cause me happiness. So we actually think happiness and suffering come from outside. And that's why we spend our lives, is it not true, manipulating the outside world to get it to be just so low so I can get happy. Buddha says there's nothing wrong with that. But hey, honeys, you're missing the main point. If you change your actual attitude towards it, your cognitive story about it, you can get the best of both worlds. And that's why I love to always use my friends in prison as examples. They don't have the luxury of changing a damn physical thing, but they can change their way of seeing the world. This is not a new concept to us. It's just that we're a bit lazy. We'd rather change the outside thing, or we blame the outside, both for our suffering and our happiness. So the real skill is, Buddha says, nothing wrong with that. Change something. If you can, please change it. But what if you can't? That's when the work starts. And that's the essence of the whole Buddhist approach.
Is that more of like, with that last thing you said, is that more of the acceptance part of it?
Well, it's not, I mean, that can be sort of sounding really passive. It's not just that. It's not just accepting the bad things. It's learning to reinterpret them and not resist them and go crazy. Learn other ways to navigate them. Learn other ways to interpret them. We all say, and so, but not only that, but also it gives us skills to know how to deal with all the wonderful things that happen. Because instead of going berserk and grasping on at everything, instead of having a mental breakdown when things go wrong, we can learn to become more wise and more skillful and more grown up in the way we literally interpret the external world in order to become more content and fulfilled and self-confident and therefore more compassionate and wise, you know? I mean, we can to become a better. So in other words, this molding your mind into any shape you like. I mean, one approach, the Buddhist view is, I mean, this is where it sounds deceptively simple. The Buddhist model talks about basically we've got neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based, unhappy states of mind that are the source of our own pain and the source of why we make a mess of our relationships. And guess what? They're called attachment, anger, jealousy, depression, low self-esteem. We all know these. And then we've got the positive, appropriate states of mind called intelligence, self-confidence, love, compassion. And Buddhism goes into really precise detail in identifying these conceptual stories that underpin those emotions so you can reconfigure those conceptual stories. Really, you learn to really reconfigure the way you see the world, to reconfigure these conceptual stories that underpin the emotions. But our tragedy is we only notice what's going on in our mind when the body's shaking. You only notice you're depressed when you can't get out of bed one morning. You only notice you're angry when you want to kill your boyfriend, but it's a bit late, you know? So the Buddhist skill is to learn to observe, and that's where a proper little technique every morning helps, to get out of your head and observe your mind, observe all the crazy thoughts and begin to make sense of them, and then know you've got the power to not just blurt out what you feel and punch everybody you feel like, but you learn to have more kind of grown up really and we do all this. Buddha doesn't own this. He's got copyright on it. He's just very good at it. That's all. Do you get my point? So we can be in charge of our lives, and we all want that.
But do we all want that? Or do you think we're afraid of being?
Okay, then you're right. If we don't want it, then we'll just keep them miserable. You're absolutely right. Exactly. And it's possible. The Buddhist view is it's possible, every one of us, but it's kind of the hardest job we'll ever do. Because why? One, I prefer to blame my boyfriend for my happiness, if you put it that way, or my suffering. Two, I don't notice what's going on, and this is our major problem, until it's too late. I always use this dumb analogy, like as if you got this brand new car, but you've never heard of the concept of mechanics. So you drive it until one day at 100 miles an hour on the freeway. Oh, my wheels are falling off. What can I do? Well, it's a bit late, honey. So we have zero approach to our mind like that. We just go and go until you want to kill somebody or kill yourself. And then we go to our therapist, you know. It's just too late. We've got to pay more attention and know we can work with what's in there, even the painful stuff. And this is why I swear to you, my prisoners, my friends in prison, they don't have any choice but to do that. I mean, I can tell you some amazing examples. There was this one woman I always mention. Her name's Sunny. She's American. Back in the 70s, she was hitching with a hippie husband and hippie kids, and two guys picked them up, roughly speaking. And then the two guys got stopped by the police. The guys killed the police and blamed the hippie. So they're on death row in Florida. Like 17 years of hell she went through. The husband eventually got executed. She even attended the execution, and his head burst into flames. I mean, don't talk to me about prisons, never mind. But anyway, it was like this nightmare. She was living in this cell for years on end. She's totally innocent. And this is this amazing woman. She's not even Buddhist. She just had this incredible, I would call it incredible emotional intelligence. She said, at some point, I finally realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided I am not a prisoner. I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell. I'm in a cave. I mean, it almost sounds romantic, but she had this fierce determination, but she had the real skill to see that even though she couldn't change the outside, she could change the way she experienced it and saw it and interpreted it. Now, we all hear examples like this, but it's just, this is the skill. This is the Buddha's skill. And we've got to have the confidence that we can do that. Then you can be in charge of your life. Then you can enjoy the outside world, but you won't make you crazy. You'll be able to navigate it. This is the essence of being a Buddhist, I tell you.
What is the first step that as us individuals can take? Is it acceptance?
I think that's too many steps ahead.
Okay.
The first step is to think, wow, I would like to be happy. I know it's possible. And I know that the key job is to learn to know my mind, become familiar with it, and then slowly change the conceptual stories. That's
awareness. I would say.
To first know it's possible. To first know it's possible. And then when it's possible, you'll know you want to do it. So then you'd learn text. I mean, it takes time. All I can tell you is it does take time. We can't hold our breath and hope it's going to happen tomorrow. It's hard work. Like a friend of mine who's a Buddhist and a therapist, she says, Robina, it's like having your hands in your own shit, because you've got to deal with what's the rubbish inside there and learn to own it and know you can change it, because we're not set in stone. So the first step is to know it's possible. And then this gradual work of developing some skill to pay attention. Yeah, pay attention to your thoughts. But this sounds ridiculous, but a really powerful starting point, and this is very key in the Buddhist approach, is you first got to control the servants of your mind. And guess what they are? Your body and your speech. So all my life, I prided myself on saying exactly what I wanted when I wanted. So I hurt so many human beings, So my first job is zip the lip. And if I can't control the servant of my anger, which is my mouth, in my case, I didn't punch and kill, how in the name of God can I change my mind? So your first one is learn the practical approach of it's like being grown up. Control your mouth, control your body. Don't just leap on every piece of cake you want. Don't just vomit out every word you feel. And it's not being fundamentalist, it's being intelligent. So you don't run around harming yourself and harming others. And the other point in Buddhism, which is the deal about karma, which is a philosophical view of the universe, basically, not just some hippie trippy thing, is that everything we think and do and say produces the person we become. So you get this real sense of wanting to know your own mind, wanting to change your own self, because everything you think and do and say produces who you become. This is what, we are the boss, in other words, the Buddhist view. We can become, everything we think and do and say, they say, leave seeds in the mind that produce your future experiences, or program you, if you like. So this sense of responsibility is what comes slowly. And knowing that my Catholic mother used to say, virtue has its own rewards. So to really get to see that when I'm miserable, I'm angry, I'm depressed, who do you think is suffering? Forget the people I harm. Have a look at yourself. If we could even own that and see that it's the depression itself, the anxiety itself, the jealousy itself that is so painful. Of course, the external world is terrible. Of course, people do terrible things to us. There's no denying that. But if we completely believe, what do you mean I should change? They should change, then you're in trouble. So it demands a lot of grown-upness, really, to know we can change, learn to control our body, our speech, and our mind, and turn ourselves into the person we want to become. So the first step is just to know it's possible. Then you have to learn to develop the awareness of your thoughts and feelings, but it really takes time because there's such a mess in there, and it's slowly, and having that confidence.
Is there a tool that can help us to start to uncover that? Is it sitting down to meditate?
Exactly. The first kind of this Buddha's skill is these brilliant meditation skills. They came from Indians even before the Buddha, and all the general world view about what's called mindfulness, and there are like 47 varieties now, and that's okay. They're all coming from this root, this powerful technique developed by these genius Indians centuries ago that enables you, when it's really developed, to get to really completely subdue the neurotic, the gross conceptual sensory level of our mind, because Buddhism would assert we've got this much subtler levels. We don't even posit these in neuroscience. So we're talking at quite a sophisticated level. That's the long term. We can get this laser-like subtle focus, where then with that subtle focus, you can do this amazing work of reconfiguring all your thoughts. So you start with a simple technique, even of 3 minutes a day of learning to concentrate. So a typical one the Buddha taught you decide to focus on something. You got to anchor your mind to something. So you focus on the breath, for example, the sensation at your nose as you breathe in and out. It's simple. And you just decide, I'm going to pay attention to the breath. Well, what will happen in 2 seconds is you wander off. We chat to ourselves. So you develop this skill to bring the attention back to the breath. You bring your attention back to the breath. That's a simple technique for even 3 to 4 minutes. You're not going to be very good at it, but you're training yourself to be disciplined, not just to follow mindlessly every thought. So you're developing the discipline, and from that comes begin to bring some awareness. So when you open your eyes and you're working in the kitchen, your hubby's there, the kids are there, you're on the road driving, you're not just totally focused on the outside and only notice your mind when you want to scream. You're noticing also what's going on in your mind, and you start to work with that slowly. It's this gradual, slow skill, you know?
I know one thing that comes up for me a lot is shame.
That's interesting, exactly.
And I wanted to know what your view in the Buddhist of shame.
Guilt. You mean
guilt. Maybe I'm misconstruing shame for guilt.
I understand. I think it's one of the commonest ones we've got. Okay, so to talk about that, I've got to talk about this kind of fundamental view about all these unhappy neurotic states of mind, but there's 3 of them. Buddha always, they're so cute in the text, they refer to them as the 3 poisons. You can say the 3 toxic emotions that are really the basis of all the others. So the most primordial one, and I just mention it, is so subtle we don't even notice. And this is really when you get into the deeper Buddhist wisdom teachings. The Buddha says we've got this really primordially deep misconception about the very nature of our own self, which causes us to be fearful and neurotic. The real and its main voice is this emotional hunger called attachment, which always wants everything to be lovely, always wants everything to be nice. So the obvious level of attachment is attachment to sex, drugs, rock and roll, sensory objects. We grasp at them, believing when I get them, I'll get happy. That's okay. It's not being critical. It's just looking at how we are. But listen, the deeper attachment, this is the one that's really primordial, is this emotional hunger to be approved of, to be a good boy, to be a good girl, since we're born. So this is driving us at such a subtle level, it's hard to see it. So when you're a naughty boy, even when you're a little boy, and now when we're a big boy, I did the wrong thing, and almost like we're channeling mum or God, I'm a naughty boy, I did something wrong, and we're waiting to be found out almost. It's very ancient in us. So we've got this craving to be seen as a nice person. And when we do naughty things, we over-exaggerate our badness and then say, I'm a bad person. So one way of talking about guilt is anger, but you're the object. Like if I'm mad at you, Will, I'll say, you did this and you did that and you're a bad person. I'll be angry at you. Well, look at guilt. I did this and I did that and I'm a bad person. So it's really internalized anger. But the key function from the Buddhist point of view, the key function of all the neurotic states of mind is that they exaggerate. So anger exaggerates the badness of things, and guilt exaggerates your own badness. And we run to it automatically. It's all very subtle. This attachment, and the third one, and the third poison is called anger, but at a more subtle level, it's aversion. So we have attachment to be everything to be lovely. And the moment everything isn't lovely, we have this aversion or anger or guilt. It's internalized or externalized. And we run between these two like 1,000 times a day. But all the other rubbish kind of stem from these. It's quite primordial, quite interesting analysis, but it takes us time to hear it.
It sounds very subconscious that
totally subconscious and very instinctive. We've programmed ourselves to perfection. So to unpack all this stuff and unprogram is not easy and not an easy job. It's not like a really, I think I'll get angry. I think I'll get depressed. What a joke, We just run to it like a magnet. So, and the Buddha's view, of course, we know about the Buddha's view, Buddha talks about how we come into this life programmed, not with mum and dad's stuff, that's his radical difference, but this is the whole view about karma, and it's in all the philosophy, it's all there in the literature. We come programmed with our own stuff from our own past. The consciousness comes from before. That's a major point in the Buddhist view. We come programmed with our own stuff.
Are you talking about generational trauma, as we like to call it?
No, reincarnation.
Oh, okay.
It's fundamental in the whole Buddhist philosophical view of the world. You don't have to buy into it, but it's just an interesting point. But I came into this world with tendency to be angry, maybe kind, maybe loving, maybe good at music, and we tend to think that track it back to your mum and dad. They could also be good at it, but the Buddhist one is we really learn to own your own stuff because we brought it with us. That's a major difference in Buddhism. One doesn't have to go into that view, but it's an interesting approach, but it's all very automatic. No one had to teach me to be angry. I promise. I had it down,
Yeah, me too.
That's right. So we have to, and then when we know, and the tragedy is, of course, because we're born with these habits and they feel so instinctive, our tragedy is we assume this is who I really am. I'm stuck with it. And that's a really sad thing. But there's nothing set in stone in our minds. We can change out. There's no thing we can't change. Everything's impermanent, but we believe this is who I am. I'm hopeless. I'm no good. I'm depressed. I'm angry. I'm jealous. It's like set in stone. That's one of our worst crimes against ourselves, I think.
You had mentioned earlier something that I've said before about being basically, with our health, waiting for like a crisis to happen in order to do something. Exactly. Do you notice, is that specific to the West, or do you notice that in general as people not being more proactive? Are you talking
about mental health or physical?
Really anything but mental health.
I think the mental one is mainly. I think as soon as we have a headache, we'll tend to rush off and try and get a pill. As soon as we get a toothache, so we're very conscious of our body and know we can do it. But I think the tragedy is because, as Will said, we have so much guilt and it's all hidden. We don't want to be a naughty girl, so we try to hide it. We're desperate to keep it all away, and we feel so ashamed. So and even though therapy is now so open and so talked about, we still wait until you want to kill yourself or your boyfriend before you go to the therapist. In other words, when you start to feel yourself getting a bit annoyed, you don't go to your therapist. I got annoyed today. They'd laugh at you. But that's the sign. That's the wheels wobbling. You don't wait till the wheels fall off. You don't wait till the wheels fall off before you fix your bloody car. You wait, the wheels are wobbling. It's a big sign. Go to the mechanic. We don't have that attitude about our mind. And I think that's across the board in the West and in Western psychology. It's really tragic. No wonder we all have mental breakdowns. The view here is that we really learn from the tiny childhood to become familiar, know we could learn to work with our minds skillfully. We would never go crazy because you'd grab it in time. It's really hard to deal with 100 miles an hour, the wheels falling off. It's like damage control is your best. That's our big tragedy. But why we wait till then is because we think it's the boyfriend's fault. We think it's the world's fault. Or we guilty and hide it away and feel ashamed, and we just don't know how, and we don't have tools. I think it's my point. We don't have tools.
That's perfect. I was going to ask that. What contributes to it
Western.
Besides the guilt?
And maybe it's everywhere, but if you've got this Buddhist approach, if you're brought up with it, or any decent spiritual approach, you'd have tools when you were young and you could learn to work with them. Of course you can. I can see this with good parents who enable their children to be conscious of their thoughts and feelings, It's a marvelous thing if you can have parents who do that, and parents are already conscious, not blaming our parents. And it's amazing education. And more these days, children are getting this kind of education, I think. Not sure.
Why do you think we see more of the depression, the anger, the anxiety? Why are we seeing the increase in that? If in your opinion?
Well, I'll try and just give the Buddhist analysis, okay?
Okay.
So attachment is this driving force for most of us. And this is the Buddha's view. It's very ancient and very primordially deep, way more subtle than we would imagine. And it's this emotional hunger, and its energy is dissatisfaction. We're never satisfied. So always think, I don't have enough, which causes you to hanker after something. And this is a very powerful feeling of not feeling enough. And that's in our culture. And the irony is, in a culture like ours, where you can just get anything you want in the universe, no matter how much you get, we all know, as my mother used to say, the more you get, the more you want. We all know that, so the more you're always dissatisfied, and you assume, if I get the cake, get the boyfriend, get the handbag, it'll cause me to be satisfied. But we're still hungry. We're still emotionally hungry. So then when attachment doesn't get what it wants, it builds up. One of the ways they talk in Buddhist psychology, there's any millisecond of what we think and do and say, none of it goes astray. It's all stored as memories. So things don't go in one ear and out the other. You could have 50 events a day where attachment didn't get what it wanted. You broke the cup doing the dishes. Your boyfriend got mad at you. The red light. You don't deal with it. You just get more and more stressed, more and more broken. You don't deal with it at that moment. You let it, you build up, and then you're inert in bed in a month, depressed, or you want to kill yourself because it builds up and we don't deal with the small moments. So learning to deal with the small moments and solving it, then you don't carry it around with you, So I think the depression one is because in our society, we're all dissatisfied. No matter, the more we get, the more we have this dissatisfaction. I think it's not meant to be religious. It's so obvious. The more you get, the more you want. You're never satisfied. But we keep being convinced that tomorrow I'll get it. The cake will do it. Another boyfriend, another this. So there's so much agitation, so much It's not being against having things. You can be a multimillionaire and be satisfied, but you can be poor and be dissatisfied. So it's a mental thing we're describing. So I think go on.
Is it something? I'm curious. Is that something innately in us when we're born?
This is what the Buddhist view would say, it's attachment. And this is why the Buddhist view would say we bring this from many lifetimes of programming.
Okay.
Practicing it. It's deeply instinctive. I mean, look at this one of dissatisfaction, especially the one of not just I haven't got enough, but I am not enough. Look at that one, the self-loathing we had. The Dalai Lama heard it and he said, that's a mental illness. That's the really serious dissatisfaction. We loathe ourselves. So we're never happy. We want to change our nose, change our gender, change. I'm not being rude about it. I'm not being political. We're never satisfied with what we have or what I am. What do we ever achieve? It's never enough. Oh, I should, we are our own worst enemies, as my mother used to say to me. This is the tragedy of this dissatisfaction. And the world is full of beautiful things and full of marvelous things, but we never can find, because we're always looking out there instead of knowing we can change our mind and become satisfied. That seems almost insane to us, but it's possible.
Why do you think we're so afraid to look inside? Is it fear? Are we afraid to know are we afraid to find out that we're much more than we think we are?
Well, okay, if we look at, I think if we're so addicted to the outside, that's a good reason not to want to look inside. Why should I? In other words, if you're my boyfriend and you're mean and someone says, well, Robina, you could look at your anger. Why should I? Will should change. That's one approach. The other one is, the other attitude is we don't like looking at the unhappy stuff. It's too pain. We get so much guilt. So we either have blame, denial, or blame, denial, or guilt. We live in those three. And so it's hard to literally confront and see it. And because then we think, well, I'm a bad person, because we over-exaggerate it. But the thing is, this is why it's so important, and this is our tragedy, to see our good qualities, Will. We never do that. 27 people can tell you you're a nice person. We're dying to hear it again, but we don't believe it. One person says one bad word, you launch into it because you believe it yourself. This is the irony of ego. We are our own worst enemies,
Is that what it is? Is it ego that has... Because it's weird because...
The view of ego in Buddhism isn't that you're a big, fat, powerful person. You're overwhelmed by attachment and neediness and hopelessness and low self-esteem and anger and arrogance and depression. That's the irony. They're the voices of ego. So when you learn to give up ego, you're not giving up your power. You're becoming more content, more fulfilled, less neurotic, more brave, more self-confident, and more loving and compassionate. That's the literal result of this work.
And maybe that's part of the misconception in the West, is that we have this thought that the ego is our, it's our bravado, it's our what we show on the outside.
So in other words, a person who's overwhelmingly self-piteous, and I'm not being critical, we're all suffering, overwhelmingly self-piteous, jealous, resentful, that's powerful ego. But it's the irony of the way we think of ego. Whether you're arrogant or low self-esteem, they're both symptoms of the same problem, There's this overdeveloped sense of I. Either I'm hopeless or I'm special. So when you lessen the neuroses, which is the Buddhist job, you grow the goodness in you, you become literally less self-centered, more connected, therefore more fulfilled. It's hard to see that.
So by the process of healing oneself, you basically kind of detach from the ego or
you throw it away, which doesn't mean you give up a sense of self. You have a more healthy sense of self, a more content self of self, you rejoice more in your own good qualities. You see your own good qualities. You're happy with yourself. You're fulfilled, but also you're loving and kind to others. It connects you to others as well. Because when you're overwhelmed by depression and anxiety and anger, you can't see past your own nose, So we are the ones who suffer. First, the Buddhist view is we've got to see, not just feeling guilty. When we talk about looking at your own anger, your own jealousy, your own depression, not just feel guilty about it, but to know that that's what's breaking our hearts. But we kind of want to blame other people for those. It's not my fault. They might not be. The world is terrible. People do terrible things to us. But if we can own these parts of ourselves, that's why my friend's in prison. I've got a friend on death row, Mitchell. He's getting close to his death date. He's been there 30 years. He's done amazing work on himself. He's taken responsibility. He's a content fellow, He's got this. He lives in this garbage dump on death row in Kentucky with 40 other guys in their red jumpsuits. They're on the death row. Some wacko guys. I know some of them. He's content, fulfilled, does his practice every day, helps others, and I'm ready for that electric jolt, he said. he's done the job, and he's in this garbage dump. I mean, I know wonderful. I'm trying to make them all sound like special, but they can't change the outside, and they change their own mind and become fulfilled and content, and therefore compassionate and wise. This is the whole idea.
Yeah, I mean, and if that's not proof enough, I don't know what is.
That's right, exactly.
Somebody is it now. See, I don't know how much you work with these people in the prisons, but is it hard for you when you do lose them?
I mean, a couple of our friends have been executed. Yeah, we had one guy, a couple, but I mean, they're just so fulfilled and content, and they're ready for it. So it's very inspiring. They die a happy death. It sounds so weird, but they know they got this. They've come to terms with their lives, and they die happy. They're content. They're not full of rage and despair. So it's very inspiring. We've all got to die at some point. So if you can be ready for it and know your life's been worthwhile, and you've developed yourself and you helped others, that's a good way to die, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and you helped them do that, so that's really great.
Exactly.
Is that really part of is really the Earth School really about developing yourself? Is it really about self-development?
Well, self-development there's a nice analogy in Buddhism that a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So the wisdom wing is putting yourself together, which is the first stages of practice in Buddhism. On the basis of that, when you become fulfilled, you've given up the rubbish old I. You don't have to worry about I anymore. You fixed your I. Now you can help others. The compassion wing is the point. When you're overwhelmed by your own junk, you can't see past your own nose. You've got to sort yourself out. And that's the job, the first stage of the job in Buddhism. And it's not meant to be self-centered. It's intelligent. And then you can be of benefit to the world and be powerful and content and fulfilled and never give up and be marvelous and useful on the planet.
Is that why so many damaged people become healers?
I don't know about that. I haven't thought about that. I don't know.
Because we're all trying to make up for something, in a way.
I don't know about that. I don't say it that way. I understand your point, but I haven't thought of it like that.
Oh, okay.
I do think it would. I do think it would add. I mean, as you can say, I'm just speaking for myself, but it definitely adds to, being grateful and having something tangible to hold on to that you can see.
Say a bit more. What are you saying?
Well, I'm just saying in response for Will, just because we both come at this through suffering and through our own experiences.
Okay.
And I think through this helping others and getting
No, I think when you go through the fires of your own suffering and misery, you could either go more mad or it's a wake-up call, and then you really have empathy for others. I mean, when you've really been through your own shit, you can only finally have empathy for others. Then it's very powerful. I agree. And even just taking the ordinary Buddhist view, even if you're not a crazy person or been much particularly suffering, when you learn to know your mind and you see the attachment, you hear the jealousy, you hear the resentment, ordinary level, you see the pain that it causes you. That's the real thing the Buddha's telling us, but we just get guilty about it. But to see the pain it's causing me, and that's why my friend Sunny was so amazing. They couldn't take my mind from me. And she told me herself, she said, she nearly went mad in solitary. She was completely innocent. Her kids have been taken away. Her husband's got executed. His brain burst into bloody flames. Excuse me, swearing. Australians say bloody. She living in a cell on her own, in isolation, treated like an animal for years with a Bible. That's all she had. So she used her own inner resources. She knew she didn't want to go crazy. She knew she had the power to work with herself. She said, I knew I had the choice to change myself, not to be overwhelmed by the anger and the rage. She knew she could change her story. So this is the most powerful example. She's amazing. And now she's out of prison in Ireland. She's old now, helping people who've been wrongly accused. She's just an amazing human being who had the power to, and she's not a Buddhist. She didn't have any particular path. She did yoga and stuff, she's got this natural, I would call it emotional intelligence, that she could see she didn't want to go crazy, and she had the power to be able to do that. That's rare.
Do you see, I don't know what, if you want to just call them regular civilians, like people not in prison.
Yeah.
Now, would you say working with someone outside of prison as opposed to working with someone in prison, is it easier or difficult? I mean, I know they're different, obviously, but
I would say The ones I know in prison are really good practitioners, meaning they really take this approach seriously.
Yeah.
They're way more powerful at it because their lives are just shitholes. The food is disgusting. The prisons are garbage. There's no sensory pleasure. There's no ordinary levels of joy. So they're the ones who are so powerful, who really become content, fulfilled human beings with nothing out there. They can't choose anything. Look at the luxury we have, having a coffee when you want it, how you want it, go where you want, think what you want, say what you want. It's almost as if we don't even realize we have choice. So you hate your job. For years you've been going to your job. Well, you could change your job, Robina. Oh, no, I couldn't do that. I'll never get another job. Well, if you can't change your job, then you could try and see the job differently and try and see the good side of it, like my friends in prison, so you can be more content. Oh, no, I couldn't do that. It's a lousy job. So what are you doing? You can't choose. You change your mind and you can't choose to change the environment. So you're paralyzed. So my friends in prison know they can change their minds. So it's much harder for us. Outside.
It's almost like we have more distractions on the
more
outside.
Distractions and more belief. Well, if I did really get that one, and if I really did get another job, then I would be happy. We kind of live in this kind of fantasy hope rather than dealing with it right now and knowing, okay, people who, people write to me, and I'm very happy to help people. They see me on YouTube, they write to me, and my job is to help people. So I do my best. But it's really some people who have suffering in relationships for years, but too afraid to leave it, too afraid to leave the job, but also too afraid to change their mind. No, it's not possible. I couldn't do that. So we just stay as a victim, paralyzed. It's not being mean about us. We should be compassionate because it's really hard to do this job. But somehow when your back's against the wall and you've got no other choice, like my friends in prison, they really come to the party. I have such admiration. I can't tell you.
Does it seem like we, in that example that you just talked about, we would gamble with, okay, our let's say our job sucks, and we're gambling with, all right, I'm scared to not take another job. Okay, so I'm going to gamble with staying here, but at the same time, we're gambling staying there and thinking that it might get better.
No, the real thing is, like with my friends in prison, they can't change the outside, but they're the only choice they've got is to change their mind, so they become happy. That's my point. So there is a way.
No,
possible. If I'm in a relationship, I've got to first decide, is there something worthwhile in my relationship with Will? Instead of always moaning, he did this and he did that, and it's hopeless, I'm lonely, I'm sad, and I hate him, he's miserable. So I've then got to decide first, well, is it worthwhile staying in this relationship? We never get to that point. We just complain. So that if I do decide there's something worthwhile in this relationship, we've got some connection, it's a good opportunity for me to learn something, then you decide to stay, then everything changes. Or you decide to leave. But we're afraid to do both. So deciding really is the point. You can decide. My friends in prison, in a sense, have decided, okay, I'm in prison, not resisting. That's the so-called acceptance, which sounds kind of cute, but that's profound, This is my job. I can't get another one, so I'm going to see if I can make the most of it. Then everything changes. This is the whole point.
Is that really the definition of emotional intelligence, realizing that you...
term. That's a very loose term, and people call it, lots of people use that in a more formal way. I would say that's intelligent, but not just being smart up here. Okay.
Because emotional intelligence...
No, I know there's a particular phrase people use. I don't mean it like that.
Okay.
Maybe it's conscious intelligence. Maybe it's awareness, aware intelligence, not just intelligence being smarty pants. Understand?
We all like to be smarty pants, though. So
okay. Okay. So what else then?
I wanted you to discuss a little bit about what the Buddhist view of reincarnation is and what it means from the Buddhist view.
Yeah, of course. I can tell you, roughly speaking, absolutely. Basically, the Buddhist view is, and this is interesting, by the way, I should preface it with this. So we have to remember where this information came from. Buddha is not a creator. There's no concept of a creator in Buddhism. That's where people who have very much devotion in a creator are shocked to hear it and don't want to hear more, but this is just a fact. Buddha came along and he doesn't have, his view is this, and it's coming from his observation. He's not a creator. And this is a very interesting point. When I was at a talk, I always quote this, in New Zealand years ago, and there was a scientist, happened to be a scientist in the group, and he asked the question, when I was talking about karma, reincarnation, which I'll do, he said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? Which is a perfect question if you believe in a creator. A creator, I mean, I was a Catholic, right? Creator invents the universe, creates the laws, runs the show, punishes and rewards. So it's obvious, it's revelation. That's how we think of religious philosophy. It's coming from on high. There's no view like that in Buddhism. So when I said in my answer, would you ask Einstein who revealed the teachings about relativity to him? Everybody laughed. But that's the Buddha's approach. So the hypothesis to take is everything that is Buddhism is coming from Buddha's own direct observation. We know that's Einstein. He didn't have a dream. He didn't have a vision. He's not making it up. We know he used his noggin and he observed the world and he's come up with his own findings. So that's exactly the Buddhist approach. So, of course, the difference in Buddhism, and this is the Indian approach coming from before the Buddha, the idea of consciousness or mind is it's not physical. It goes to much more subtle levels of cognition that, like I said before, we don't even posit in the neuroscientific model. And we're not the handiwork of a creator, and we're actually not the handiwork of mummy and daddy. Mum and dad gave me a brain, DNA, and all the rest, but consciousness is not physical, and it comes from before it goes back. It's like a river of mental moments that goes back and back and back and back and back. And when we die, it'll just inevitably go forward, forward, forward. This is the Buddha's view, okay? So, and then the second one is this law of karma. It's a natural law for the Buddha. He didn't make it up. There's no boss. And because there's no creator, there's no rewarder and there's no punisher. So it's not punishment and reward. It's a natural law such that everything any being thinks and does and says and does programs your mind. Programs your mind. So seeds in your mind that will ripen in the future in that river of mental moments and produce the person you become. So we are, in a sense, the Dalai Lama said karma is like self-creation. So all our happiness and all our suffering coming from seeds we've planted in our own mind from our own past actions. So in this sense, we are the creator of ourselves. Therefore, we're in charge. We're the boss. That's essentially the Buddha's view of reincarnation. And that can be human, other kinds of creatures as well. And this is the law that governs all beings, is what Buddha would say. That's the general idea.
Wow. Thank you so much for taking time. I know you've been traveling a lot. Timmy, before we get into the last part of the show, do you want to ask Venerable Robina anything else?
I would like to because you had talked about the bird with wisdom and compassion.
Bird with two wings, wisdom and compassion.
Yes. In your opinion, do you think that we as humans can be taught compassion?
Oh, God, yes. This is what we're doing in Buddhism. Absolutely. But the first step is, as the Dalai Lama says, compassion is not enough. You've got to do the wisdom wing. In other words, put it this way, typical person, join the universe. I'm not talking about psychotics here. We're not talking about Hitlers. We're talking about ordinary human beings. We've got some attachment, some anger, some jealousy, some depression, some low self-esteem. Look at the world, some guilt. And the Buddha's saying that's what's holding us back. That's what makes us miserable. That's what cuts me off from others. That's what makes me isolated and this very concrete me. So then I've got some compassion, but excuse me, as long as my compassion for you doesn't upset me too much, then I'm prepared to be compassionate. But so as I lessen my own neuroses, I become less neurotic, more content, more fulfilled, but just naturally more compassionate. And then we can grow that to incredible degrees. Do you see what I'm saying?
Wow.
Yes, I do. Thank you for putting it that way, actually. Yes.
It's a very proactive, full-on, step-by-step job of turning ourselves into these marvelous, wise, fulfilled, compassionate beings. That's the way to put it.
And it almost sounds like by doing the work and healing, these things are products of that.
Precisely. That's the point. Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
The potential, and that's where you get more. I mean, that's where you get. We've all got the potential. That's the point. That's what the Buddha's view is. We've all got the potential.
Wow.
So
potential.
Never give up. Key to success. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up.
Awesome, Timmy. It's been an awesome conversation. We finish up every episode with 3 questions.
Oh, so good. Okay.
I'm going to have Tim ask the first one.
Okay.
I wanted to add something real quick because I was going to say something earlier about it, and I forgot that you can also find Robina on YouTube she has these videos called Something to Think About, and they're these short little videos, but they are so full of knowledge. So if you're interested in hearing them, you just look her up on YouTube, and she has a whole slew of these videos.
I think I don't know. I never looked, but someone puts them on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well,
yeah, I'm sure.
So.
But
yeah, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyway, question.
Okay. So, do you have a favorite or a least favorite word?
Favorite word? I can't think of one. I'm sorry. I like words. It's my job. I edit books and have to speak words all the time. Enthusiasm. Optimism. Okay, enthusiasm, optimism. One of those.
Okay.
I like.
We'll take it. Good. Do you have a least favorite?
Well, that's all the rude swear words, and I say too many of them, so I better not repeat them.
That's great. I wanted to ask you, what brought you to Buddhism?
Well, I mean, since I'm a little girl, I was born up in a Catholic family in Australia, one of 7 kids in the 40s. I was born in 1944. And I mean, as soon as I went to Mass, I thought, Mum, that's my job. I'm going to be a priest. So it was very strong in me, you know, maybe talk about past karma. It was like the most natural thing in the world. And all the time as a little girl, I was the naughtiest kid in the family, the naughtiest, most rebellious kid at school. But it was deep inside me. I thought about these things all the time. And when I was 12, I was on my knees begging my mother, let me be a nun like one of these holy saints, you know. And then she cried. I cried when she said no. And then 20 years later, when I told her I was going to become a Buddhist nun, she cried. So I think my life, if I look back on it, my life led me. So I was a Catholic. Then I was 19. I was in the 60s. I gave up God and decided, goodbye, God. Hello, boys. I became a raging hippie. And then I became a raging radical lefty, was in England, right and ready for revolution in the 60s. Then I became a raging kind of black politics, supporting black politics, then a raging feminist. And then I'd literally exhausted all options of who to blame for the world. So when I was a Catholic, I blamed the non-Catholics. A hippie, I blamed the straight people. A radical lefty, I blamed the rich people. Black politics, I blamed the white people. Feminists, I blamed the males. I had no one left to blame. And by the age of 31, I bumped into these Tibetan lamas and they said, guess what, Robina? It's about time you started looking at your own mind. I'd never thought of that before. So here I am 45 years later.
Thank you for sharing. You brought some really deep insight to me, and you also just kind of gave me a smack upside the head too. So I appreciate that.
I'm happy.
Dropping wisdom.
Okay. Can I sing a little 30-second prayer to finish?
Yeah, I got one quick question first. Is that all right?
Yeah.
If there was something that you could do or that you would like to see done for mental health as a whole without any kind of restraint, what would it be?
Making available as much as possible tools to help us see our own minds and know that we've got the potential to be our own therapist, as one of my teachers said.
Love it. Thank you so much. That is so amazing. Timmy, it's been an incredible conversation. I know. That's why I wanted to finish our stuff up so she can take us out, because I wanted to finish this up with her beautiful prayer at the end. So it's been amazing. It's been another awesome Above Ground podcast. So
thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much.
It's been great to talk to you too.
Oh, it's been incredible to talk to you. So please bring us out with your prayer.
Okay, so there's two prayers. They're very short. One is kind of saying, this hour we've been together, all these thoughts we've had, may we continue to nourish these thoughts so that we can all develop our own amazing potential, so we can be a benefit to others. And the other one is just saying, may compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. I'll just sing in Tibetan, okay? It's in Tibetan. Gewadi nududag lama sangye drub gyurne drowa chikyang malupa dei sala gopashok Jang chob sem chog rinpoche ma ke panam ke gyuchig ke panyam pa me payang gong ne gong du palbashok. Thank
you so much.
Okay, wow.
It's been a pleasure.
You're doing a great job, both of you. I love you.
Thank you very much. We love you,
Thank
and
you.
you're doing an incredible job. Please stay safe. Be well.
Do my best. Thank you, darling.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for giving us a listen. New episodes every Wednesday. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can share, rate, review, and even subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Other ways to support the show: follow us on social media, share the content, share our episodes. You can also buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/abovegroundpod. For further concerns, show ideas, or just to say hi, you can email us at abovegroundpodcast@gmail. Once again, thank you for listening and supporting mental health. Keep the conversation going and stay above.